Welcome everybody to MKAU's hardware review of the AMD 6800 GPU. I'm Kurt Froloff and I'll be checking out this video card today. Now, this card is one I've wanted to get my hands on for quite some time, just because I'm a little bit biased towards AMD. And I say this mainly because dating back to my old school computer building days when I was just but a young pup, I didn't have a lot of money, and the AMD, they were just those chips you could buy, do up a computer, cheap as chips, and away you go. Coming forward to today, however, we now have the Ryzen 6000 series GPUs and the 5000 series CPUs that are giving Intel and Nvidia a run for their money. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a 5000 series CPU to test our video card with, and this is purely because stock here in Australia is very hard to come by, even for the GPUs themselves. But our test rig today will be an AMD Ryzen 3900X 12 core, overclocked slightly to 4.25 GHz. We've got obviously the Radeon 6800, not the XT, 16 gig. I've got 64 gig of HyperX DDR4 3200 MHz RAM, 4x16 gig sticks, Asus ROG Strix X570F gaming motherboard, two 1TB Samsung NVMe M2 drives, all running on Windows 10 Pros. So we'll get the specs out of the way first on the card that we have. As I said, it's the 6800, so this is the entry level Radeon 6000 series GPU. Now these retail here in Australia for up to about $1,000. It all depends on what brand of card you go for. That makes up the price as usual. Anyway, the card we have has 60 compute units, 60 ray accelerators. It uses 250 watts of power at peak load, 3,840 stream processors, 240 texture units, a boost frequency of 2,105 MHz, a gain frequency of up to 1,815 MHz, and a massive transistor counter on this piece of board at 26.8 billion transistors in total. Now, also on board, you've got the 16 gig of GDDR6 RAM running at 16 gigabit memory speed with a 256-bit interface and a memory bandwidth of up to 512 gigabytes a second. Now that's pretty massive, pretty fast. PCIe 4 is definitely minimum here. So we've got a few games that we've tested with. We've had a few weeks to play with this card. As an overall, I am happy with it. There are a couple things I want to touch on, but we'll get to that further down the track here. As I'm sure you've already noticed, playing here in the background, I've got World of Warships. It's not really a game you use for benchmarking, it's just a game I like to play, and it's a game I just wanted to try and push the limits with. Now by default, the game is actually limited to 75 frames, but with a little bit of editing, we can remove that frame rate cap. So I was just seeing how fast I could get this game running, and as it turns out, not as high a frame rate as I would have expected. But that's neither here nor there. As I said, it's not really made to go any higher than 75 frames. Moving on, for all those that may not have picked up on it yet, we have stepped over one major improvement with the AMD Radeon cards this time around. AMD have incorporated ray tracing with their RDNA 2 architecture. Now I for one am happy to see ray tracing come to AMD GPUs. However, I am not completely sold on ray tracing as yet. I've used Nvidia's ray tracing on the 2000 series, which with the help of Nvidia's DLSS, which is deep learning super sampling, ray tracing seemed to work quite well even on the entry level 2060 6 gig of RAM, so not even the super. Now bear in mind here that AMD don't have anything like DLSS as yet, and for all those that don't know, DLSS is actually the AI rendering technology that Nvidia use to effectively upscale your resolution. So what it actually does is if you want to play in 2K or 4K, DLSS will render in a lower resolution at the same time upscaling it. It needs less power to give you sharper, better looking visuals that you would have got at those higher resolutions. The way that this works well with ray tracing is because as soon as you turn on ray tracing, you take a massive hit to performance. If you combine your ray tracing with DLSS, the performance hit is not quite as bad. That's enough about NVIDIA for now. Let's move over to the AMD 6000 series GPU, of which we're all here to find out about. Now, ray tracing on this card was actually quite hit and miss, I found. This could be a combination of lack of any DLSS, along with not a heap of support for it in some games now. For one, I tried Cyberpunk, which, well, I had it on the console. It was just glitchy and buggy. But on PC, I actually didn't have too many issues with it, I gotta say. But ray tracing isn't enabled for AMD yet on Cyberpunk, so we couldn't even test that. But I did, however, test the ray tracing on Fortnite and Control with mixed results, I gotta say. The drama with the ray tracing is the fact that it does take such a performance hit, even on a card as beastie as 6800. For the rest of my tests, I tested the performance on different resolutions, 1080, 1440p, 2160p, on a number of different games, but for the sake of this review, the ones I'll be showing you is Assassin's Creed Origins, GTA 5, we've got Control footage there as well, and also Fortnite. So without further ado, let's get into the first game, which is Assassin's Creed Origins. It's just the benchmarking test, which is as close as I can get to a uniform test in Assassin's Creed, even though the scenes themselves do change slightly. For the most part, it is as accurate as test as I can get. So let's jump in and take a look.
فين دعاء؟ سحرية الشيش تعاو
عم حسبك يانو ياك يا سن
Next up, the long-awaited footage of Fortnite. Yes, I cop enough crap from around here about playing Fortnite, but you know what? It's a guilty pleasure, and I like it. So, to do my comparison here, I didn't have any benchmarking tests, etc. I just relied on my awesome skills to come down, land in the same spot, and dance on over to the same brick wall. One thing I want to mention here though is that while my comparison that I've got coming up is 4K only, I did do further testing on 2K 1080p, and I did find though the biggest thing that I struggled with was on that ultra wide 2K screen. Now that is 3440 by 1440p, and with that, pushing out the frames really did struggle to get past 120 frames comfortably. Even trying to sit it on 120 frames, it would drop. Now I don't know if it's just Fortnite, with my comparison coming up, I have done 4K Epic settings ray tracing off and 4K Epic settings ray tracing on. Massive, massive difference. It did really struggle, as you're about to see. So next up, we've got GTA 5. This is actually quite surprising too. So I've got 3 comparison clips here, which I did my absolute very best to get them rolling side by side without too much vertical screen tear. The 3 clips are 4K normal settings, 2K normal settings, and 2K everything turned up to max. And in case you're wondering, the reason why I have not included the 4K on max settings here is because, as you will see, 4K on normal settings is only just above playable in some parts of this video. So maxing that out, it's going to be a pointless comparison, I believe. Let's have a look. you go. What did you think? Should I have included the 4K in max settings or just left it how it was there? I don't think I would have done it any more justice by adding in the maximum settings. It would have only dropped the frame rate even further. As you can see, the difference in 1440p max and normal was quite significant. I want to move on to Cyberpunk. Now with Cyberpunk I did the obvious 2K max settings, 4K max settings. The clips that I've compared, just because of my slackness in pressing buttons when I am supposed to move the conversation on, I've just cut bits and pieces from the car ride with Dex. And as you'll see, 4K 60 is kind of a pipe dream even on my rig, but it is quite a heavily graphical game as well. And once again, is this something that DLSS would make a significant difference with if AMD had access to something like that? Or would even the smart access make a significant enough difference here? Once again, I can't be sure. But here, let's have a look. You can be the judge.
Yo, Miss V, a pleasure.
Dexter Deshawn in the flesh. Ample indeed.
Let's roll. Mind if I ask you something right off the bangle? Would you rather live in peace as Miss Nobody, die ripe, old, and smelling slightly of urine, or go down for all times in a blaze of glory smelling near like posies without seeing your 30?
It's first place or no place, Dex. Cost isn't a factor.
Classic. I'd expect nothing less from eager, supple youth. Respect.
All right. What weapon?
All right,
Understood.
listen
Got it.
close. Scanning a serious job now. Playing gargantuan compared to smashing up a scav home.
What's the job?
There's this prototype tech, a biochip to be precise. Job's to grab it. Simple.
Guessing it belongs to a corp?
Mm-hmm. Arasaka. Surely that's no problem.
Corps don't deserve special treatment.
Shit, you ain't playing around. Got a feeling this could be a start of a beautiful friendship built on heaps of eddies.
You work this out? Got a plan?
Two things. First, a conundrum with the Maelstrom boys. Needs active resolving that. Second, a rendezvous. Simple. Client who brought us the job's anxious. She wants to parlay with one of the team. Got a classic tale for you. Psycho gang doing his thing 2 weeks back. Jumped a Militech convoy. Got away with the gear. Corp don't even know Maelstrom's involved. Now see, convoy was carrying the Flathead, a little combat bot, a prototype. And I need me that bit of high-grade military tech. Because if we don't get that bot, we don't get no soccer chip. And we sure as hell don't get no happily ever after. But don't get excited. It's a single-use toy. Now, I flat out purchased the damn thing from Maelstrom. Problem is, I did so from a gent went by the name of Brick. I say when, because Brick was the leader. 3 days after we'd sealed our deal, his friend and gangmate, one Simon Randall.
So there you go, there's Cyberpunk in 4K, 2K max settings. What do you think? I wasn't super impressed. I was sort of umming and ahhing whether or not to include it, but I figured it is the game of the now. So let's put it in anyway, because let's see how well it goes. So now on screen, you'll see some control footage. This I was playing with in ray tracing on and off, and the one thing that I did like about control is you can make effectively your own DLSS. So you can pick your resolution and you can pick your render resolution manually. And it did make differences, massive differences in some cases, where the graphics on screen were not overly worse off in a lower render resolution. But turn ray tracing on in a lower render resolution and frame rate stayed stable. This is what makes me think that AMD definitely needs to incorporate a DLSS equivalent of some description with their hardware to get even more out of it. If they are able to do that, then AMD are definitely on a winner-winner chicken dinner here. When it comes down to the 4K gaming side of things though, even on the box of the 6800 that I've got here, it says uncompromised 4K gaming. I gotta say, even now, 4K gaming at 60 frames on a PC, for the average Joe or average Jane without spending a truckload of money, just seems impossible, or impossibly playable. The Xbox Series S and X, or I should say Series X, is the 4K version, isn't it? And the PlayStation 5, you know, they're touting 4K 120 frames, you know, ray tracing, all this for under $1,000. That's kit caboodle. Yep, plug it in your TV, 4K TV, away you go. Do that with a PC, you need to spend that much money and more just on a graphics card to try and get to that 4K gaming. Now, to be fair, 4K gaming, once again, it's like anything new. Everybody wants to do it, everybody wants to get on that bandwagon. 4K 60, 4K 120, ooh! And we even now have 8K gaming mentioned by Nvidia, coming from their top of the line 3090 24 gig of RAM for an Australian $3,000 just for the graphics card. This is most definitely where consoles seem like a much sweeter deal. But I digress. Back to the card at hand. Overall, I gotta say that I do love this card. I love the potential that it has. At the moment though, it's still lacking. It still seems to be falling behind. But in saying that, I do only have your entry level 6800. If I compare it to my daily driver, my entry level 5600 XT with 6 gig of RAM, yes, the 6800 is a massive step up. It is also not a big price step up. The 5600 XT, when it was new, was about $650 Australian dollars. You've got the 6800 now, new, if you can get it, for anywhere from about $800 upwards. But with 16 gig of RAM, there is one thing that I haven't touched on just yet, and that is media creation. 16 gig of RAM, you have so much more headroom moving forward. It's future proofing, and as I said, at the moment, the 6800 I don't believe has reached its full potential. Now when I render in Adobe After Effects or Premiere Pro using the GPU to render with, having that 16 gig of RAM has made a significant difference in time. But the one problem I find at the moment comparing AMD and Nvidia side by side is that Nvidia still has more support in the industry. It is easier to find games that support ray tracing on Nvidia. It is easier to find games that have something that is Nvidia specific in the game for graphics. It's frustrating. It just reminds me of the console wars. And now we've also got the games that are going to enable ray tracing for Nvidia but not AMD, or enable it for AMD but not Nvidia, or they'll put a timed release on it. That stuff has got to stop. I mean, it probably won't, because it's all marketing, it's all money, and if these companies aren't making money, they're not making products. If they're not making products, then we got nothing to play with. And I, for one, want them to keep making these products, keep bettering themselves. AMD has now taken a massive step forward with the Ryzen 5000 series CPUs and the 6000 series GPUs. I believe Nvidia and Intel, they need to be watching their backs now. AMD is coming for you. They are doing a fantastic job, and they are only getting better. And now to, I guess, the question of the moment. Would I personally recommend buying a Radeon RX 6800 GPU? The short answer here is yes. It is a great piece of hardware, great bang for your buck. It does have a couple shortcomings at the moment, but it is something that AMD is consistently improving upon, and it is something that AMD can improve upon without forcing you to go out and buy newer, upgraded hardware. And I can get on board with that. For AMD to go toe-to-toe with Nvidia, I think that is a massive, massive feat on their part. In my opinion, Nvidia is somewhat playing the Apple game, whereas you have your brand and you are playing on your brand to charge higher prices. Is Nvidia's hardware better than AMD's hardware? At the moment, I'm just not in a position to make that judgment right now. However, with what I am seeing online, the articles I'm reading, what I'm getting from the industry, I don't believe the gap is anywhere near as big as what it once was, and I can't wait to see what is coming up from AMD in the near future. Anyway, thank you for taking the time out to listen, watch, and I hope I haven't bored you too much with this. Stay safe, be good to one another. Till next time.